manifesto is entitled A Bright Future for a Changed Sport. The title reflects my belief in two things: that cycling has a bright future and that our sport has changed. I'd invite you to take a minute to decide whether you share that belief. To ask yourself whether cycling has a bright future. To ask yourself whether cycling has changed. These are the questions that exist for the millions of people who continue to embrace our sport worldwide. Our riders have been quick to answer that it is now possible to race and win clean, that the culture within our sport has changed, and that cycling is moving in the right direction. I have worked with each and every one of you to transform our sport over the past 8 years. We have faced many challenges. We have taken difficult decisions. Together, we have changed the culture of our sport. I am proud of what we have achieved, and I'm proud that cycling is now a global sport. I am proud that cycling has the most sophisticated and effective anti-doping infrastructure in world sport. But the mission upon which I set out in 2005 is not yet complete. That's why I'm asking you, for a final term as your president, I want to finish the job that I started. I have spent my life in cycling. My career as a cyclist, international race organizer and administrator has given me a unique insight into the elements of our sport. I have drawn on this experience to set 4 priorities for the next 4 years: to preserve the new culture and era of clean cycling, to ensure equality in cycling through the development of women's cycling, to modernize the way cycling is presented as a global sport, and to foster the global development of cycling. I have been influenced by the ideas and the opinions of the riders, the teams, the race organizers, the sponsors, the federations, the sports institutions, the media, and fans who have engaged in and contributed to the UCI stakeholder consultation exercise, A Bright Future for Cycling, which I initiated last November. Our stakeholders seized that opportunity to shape cycling's future. Crucially, they recommended to the UCI restore the credibility of cycling and the public perception of the sport, improve the UCI's relationship with WADA, decide whether to hold an independent inquiry into the Armstrong affair and whether to offer riders reduced sanctions for coming forward into that inquiry. I remain committed, as does the Management Committee of the UCI, to conducting an independent audit into the UCI's actions during the Armstrong era and to introducing some form of truth process for professional cycling. I am fully confident that the UCI can work in partnership with WADA to achieve that. Preserve the new culture and era of clean cycling. The stakeholders' consultation also recommended that the UCI increase the independence of Cycling's Anti-Doping Foundation as a matter of high priority, and I support that. I propose to increase the UCI World Tour team's contributions to anti-doping to fund and increase the independence of the CADF. I will complete the process now underway to appoint an independent board to the CDF. The CDF must also operate as an independent standalone communication structure to report its activities and to liaise with the media. Clearly, the UCI needs to do a much better job communicating our anti-doping activities and reassuring the public and our stakeholders that we were doing everything possible to ensure a clean sport and protect clean riders. Brian, however, is promising to revolutionize the UCI approach to anti-doping by ignoring the recommendation of the stakeholders to increase the independence of the CADF, by abandoning decisions of the UCI Management Committee to accept those recommendations, and by turning a blind eye to the fact that he has vouched for, voted on, and approved the independence of the CADF in numerous Management Committee meetings. The UCI has a pivotal role to play in supporting teams and riders and in creating an environment that continues to be conducive to the cultural change within our sport. I will introduce policies to ensure that teams are no longer structured on the historic model that left riders without adequate mentoring, support and supervision, and that gave rise to doping. Today's riders should never be faced with having to make the same choices as previous generations. These policies will guarantee that today's teams and those of the future are built upon a model where riders are placed at the centre of the organisation, where their performance is monitored and underpinned through collaboration with a multidisciplinary scientific team. The UCI requires a skills certification standard to ensure that those working within professional teams, as doctors, coaches, sports directors, are suitably qualified and proved to be so. The team structure must ensure that there is one doctor, one coach, one sports director with separate responsibilities for every 7 riders. This will enhance the level of monitoring, care and support available to each rider, thereby helping riders to better manage their workload, race schedule and recovery. I acknowledge that the UCI must also introduce a sustainable and long-lasting economic model to assist teams with the implementation of these initiatives. This may well require that the UCI reduce the size of teams at World Tour level and at UCI continental level by 5 or more riders respectively. Cycling stakeholders must never lose sight of their collective responsibility to preserve the new culture of clean racing and the value of doing so. This is the direction that I intend to pursue as UCI President, to preserve the new culture and era of clean riding that exists today. I will consult and work with the teams to deliver those proposals which are a roadmap for the direction that cycling must take in the immediate future. Equality in cycling. The UCI must bring a new focus in developing women's cycling. It is not acceptable that women in cycling do not receive the same pay, prize money and conditions as men. It is past time for this inequality to be brought to an end. I have already overseen the introduction of equal prize money for men and women at UCI World Championships. In 2014, equal prize money is extended to Continental Championships. I am committed to separating the women's cycling from the UCI Road Commission and to establishing an independent women's commission with responsibility for developing all disciplines of women's cycling. And I will continue to encourage more women to hold decision-making positions within cycling. I will ensure that the UCI develops a new global women's elite race calendar that is easy to understand, and that Olympic funds are split equally between the development of both men and women's cycling. I will seek to ensure that events seeking World Tour status are given priority if they have a women's event, and that teams seeking World Tour status should also be given priority if they have a women's team. Modernise the way the sport is presented. Cycling has prospered and grown from being a predominantly European sport to a global one, with riders from over 44 countries now competing at the UCI World Tour and races taking place on 5 continents. Cycling has a duty of care to realise its global potential, but we must respect the traditions and heritage that have made our sport what it is today. Europe is cycling's heartland, or to be more precise, Europe is the beating heart of world cycling. The greatest races on the global stage have been fought out in Europe for generations. Their place in the cycling calendar should never be undermined by our ambition to globalise cycling, or by proposals to create a privately run league or so-called Champions League of cycling. I do not support those who wish to develop races outside the UCI and who do not share our respect for the UCI and the European traditions of cycling. So creating 10 new 4-day races to sit alongside the 1-day classics and 3 Grand Tours offers nothing to globalise cycling. It's the death knell of cycling. I do not want to see great races which are steeped in cycling history like the 4 Days of Dunkirk, Tour de Suisse, Tour de Romandy, Giro Trentino, Flèche de Sud, Route de Sud, naming just a few, to lose their stature. Why should these races be relegated to some meaningless second-tier calendar while those who seek only to profit from cycling fatten their bank accounts? Unlike Brian, I have no association with those who support such a strategy, and I am very clear on where I stand on this threat to undermine the European race calendar. The world economic crisis has torn at the fabric of European cycling. Race organisers have struggled to maintain the level of investment required to promote race events. The cancellation of the Giro de Piemento after 100 years, along with the Giro Reggio Calabria and the Circuit of Lorraine, and the threat to the future of the Baby Giro, Tour de Basque Country, San Sebastian Classic, are all cold reminders of the many challenges to be overcome in nations around Europe. And indeed, the UCI this year did step in with the Tour de Catalonia to keep it going. Similarly, there's a necessity for the UCI to assist nations and European nations in introducing new calendar events in order to grow our sport and sustain Europe's place as the beating heart for our sport for generations to come. I pledge my commitment to working with all the UEC federations and the UEC board to achieve that objective. My manifesto also promises reform to modernise the sport, including working with stakeholders to reorganise the existing race calendar to promote the ideal of the best riders in the best races, reforming the system that allocates and distributes World Tour points, introducing cameras on bikes, GPS rider tracking, communicating real-time data for race fans. The global development of cycling. Cycling is truly a global sport. I have led the reform of the race calendar on all 5 UCI continents to attract new riders and teams and to enable more countries to qualify riders for our World Championships and Olympic Games. I intend to develop a long-term strategic plan and vision to globalise the sport, which is another one of the 6 crucial recommendations to emerge from the UCI's stakeholders consultation. I've already overseen the launch of Tour Beijing, 2 tours in Canada, Tour Down Under in Australia, and I will continue to develop cycling in new countries around the world, focusing on Brazil, Russia, India, China, as well as Africa. I want to expand the UCI's continental and national federation department to support confederations by professionalising their administration and marketing. The World Cycling Centre has now become a university of cycling, attended since its inception 11 years ago by athletes from 118 nations, including this year's Tour de France winner, Chris Froome. And I want the World Cycling Centre to train even more athletes, coaches, mechanics, soigneurs, and administrators. An IOC member for cycling. Cycling will continue to face new challenges. How we meet and overcome them will define how our sport continues to develop and prosper. As your President, I believe that I present the experience and the international standing to lead cycling throughout the next 4 years. It has been my great privilege to serve as a member of the IOC for the past 3 years, and I'm extremely well placed to work alongside my colleagues in the Olympic movement to advance cycling and ensure that its standing remains strong and positive. I welcome that this week the IOC voted to confirm cycling as one of the 25 core sports in the Olympic programme. Each of your national federations depends upon cycling's position as a core sport in the Olympic and Paralympic Games to secure funding from your respective governments. Preserving cycling's position as a core Olympic sport is therefore critical to the development of your national federation and to our sport worldwide. And my experience as an IOC member will be especially important after the 2016 Olympic Games, when the International Olympic Committee conducts a complete review of the events, formats and quotas for the 2020 Olympic Games. This review will be conducted by the IOC President, and it is imperative that the UCI and its President are fully engaged in the future review process in order to maximise all opportunities for our sport. It is of vital importance that the UCI President is an IOC member. And I'd like you to fully understand the reality that cycling will lose this influential IOC position if I'm not elected UCI President. And I'm not scaremongering. That's reality. Of the 28 Summer Olympic sports, only 12 currently have their President as IOC members. I'm obliged to resign if I'm not UCI President. The IOC President must then decide on a replacement from those 17 sports who do not have IOC membership and submit them for approval to the IOC Executive Board. And that's not all. UK, United Kingdom, has currently 4 IOC members: Sir Craig Reedy, Princess Anne, Sir Philip Craven, and Adam Pengilly, and there won't be a 5th. One of the existing 4, should he become an honorary member and a position opened up, that position will certainly be given to Lord Sebastian Coe to replace him following the role of the outstanding success of the London Games, and also he's going to be the future IAAF President. Governments and management. Many of you present today have at one time or another met with me at my office in the UCI headquarters in Aigle. I vividly recall the first time I sat behind that desk in the office in the UCI. The full weight of responsibility on my shoulders. The ambition that burned to put my own stamp on the UCI and world cycling. I vowed to myself at that time that I would be a different president to my predecessor, who was headstrong and never far from the fray of battle as he delivered his own vision for our sport. I was idealistic, brimming with energy, enthusiasm, and very much intent and self-assured in my conviction that I could achieve all I wanted in 4 years as UCI President. And then, sadly, it dawned on me very early in that first term that that's not possible. While I have no desire to recount history, it is worth reflecting on those early days of my first presidency. ASO had rejected the Pro Tour, the French Cycling Federation were threatened with expulsion from the UCI, teams were losing sponsors, and cycling stood on the precipice of a civil war. I will confess that my experience as UCI President has taught me many things, but that the baptism of fire in those first few months and years as President provided me with a lasting lesson. That the primary role of the UCI President is to uphold and defend the principles of the UCI, and that it is always possible to find a solution, the way forward, when stakeholders share a genuine interest in developing and protecting the future of our sport. I have applied that lesson in leading and defending our sport throughout the many damaging and turbulent episodes in cycling history that followed, through the Rasmussen, Landis, Contador, Operation Puerto, and ultimately through the USADA affair. I've come face to face with adversity, and my presidency has certainly been defined and characterized by these and other events. Although my goals to globalise cycling, to clean up our sport and to change the culture of our sport so the riders can race clean have always been my true objective. I'm proud of what I've achieved in the past 8 years. I've always had the backbone to pursue my own vision, to stand up for our sport and to fight for what I believe is right for cycling. Doing so has not always led to positive press, but I believe that you must always stand for what you believe in, to be right, and not for how you want to be perceived. Cycling needs a president who stands his corner, who has overcome adversity, and who knows how to do it again. The position of the UCI president is a responsible position. Those who occupy it have a duty to uphold and defend the principles of the UCI, to stand up for cycling rather than capitulating to those who seek to undermine or profit from the sport. Let nobody be under any illusion about what the job entails. It requires experience and good relations to overcome the many unpredictable and often diverse challenges it presents. Bradley Wiggins once remarked that there are no easy days in cycling. I no longer race my bike, but as UCI President I share the sentiment. If this job was simply about drafting and implementing a manifesto, then life would be altogether easier for any UCI President and the dedicated UCI colleagues who work alongside him. Brian's manifesto proposes to separate governments from the management of the UCI. While many national federations have succeeded in doing so, it would be impractical and impossible for the UCI to do so. The UCI Constitution is very clear on the role of the UCI President. The executive powers vested upon the President cannot be simply relinquished or abdicated to unelected administrators. The UCI President is fully responsible for representing the sport, managing relations with external agencies such as the IOC and WADA, and collaborating with 178 national federations. The UCI Management Committee is elected to set the mission, vision and strategy of the UCI. The UCI President is also responsible for ensuring that the Director General and the Executive Staff implement that strategy and they as they administrate the UCI. The day-to-day function of the UCI President dictates, as a matter of fact, that the position is full-time and based in Switzerland. My manifesto sets out my record of transforming the sport on a worldwide basis since I became President in 2005. Brian claims to have transformed British cycling, but also to have done so holding down a full-time job. Yet, after 16 years as his President, it's not defined as such. The role and the introduction of national lottery funding has played and enabled British cycling to achieve Olympic Games success, and that's already well documented. Sky have signed a 5-year multi-million-pound agreement to become British cycling's principal sponsor. A month after David Brailsford outlined his plans to win the Tour and with a British rider at a luncheon hosted by the sports journalists in London. That's what transformed British cycling. In the meantime, Brian has presided over the collapse of the United Kingdom's premier calendar from 18 events down to 6 events. The Tour of Britain is now the only UCI stage race in the UK where domestic racing has been left to the goodwill of volunteers to survive.
Do we have to
I'm seeking re-election on my record on transforming this sport as President of the UCI. I have changed the culture of the sport. It is now possible to race and win clean. To return to my opening question, my answer is as follows. Yes, cycling has a bright future. Yes, our sport has changed. I have a job to finish, and I call upon your continued support that to ensure I accomplish that mission. Thank you very much.